Hello and welcome to another YEV podcast. And this is basically the EV podcast, which is balanced, which is quite refreshing, really, after seeing what you see out there all the time. My name's Aylen, and I've got Alex Grant with me here. And I'm a slightly darker room than usual. I've been banished up here for today. But yeah, we've got a lot to talk about on this session, right, Alex?
Yeah. Everything seems the goalposts, the ever-moving goalposts, appear to be moving again, or so reports would have you believe.
Yeah, we want to go into the detail about what's been announced in inverted commas or leaked, so to speak, from a senior lawmaker in the EU vicinity, and what are the pros and cons of this? Because there's always going to be positives and negatives, and that's what we're going to dive into on this session today. So yeah, where shall we start with this, Alex? Where should we start? So I suppose first of all, the announcement. You shared it with me, didn't you?
So there's been an interview where they're talking about having all technologies on the table. So at the moment, in the EU, there is a 2035 deadline for all manufacturers to reach the point of 100%. I'm phrasing this in the most clumsy way possible. All manufacturers to reach 100% CO2 reduction at the tailpipe, which basically means you can only sell EVs and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles by that point. It's a slightly different setup to the system in the UK, although the deadline is exactly the same. And actually, the UK was ahead of the EU in terms of announcing that. So we were 2020, I think we announced the 2035 deadline, and we actually pulled it forward from 2040. And there's been some movement in the UK, which we'll obviously come back to later. It sounds like now that there are proposals. There's been a bit of a pushback in terms of the 2035 all EV deadline, which is, I think, the best way to kind of announce it to discuss it. That's effectively what it is. But they're talking about allowing things in like synthetic fuels, as long as they're zero carbon, or e-fuels, as they're more commonly known. That's been on the cards for a while. But there's talk about allowing things like hybrids in as well. So basically just softening the CO2 targets, which after a year where the US has kind of wobbled on things is not the best news for the market, really, is it?
No, I mean, there's obviously two camps in this, generally speaking. You don't often hear from the centre, and that's what we're trying to bring here, a little bit more of a kind of a middle ground. But I suppose from a negative, the people that saw it as a negative is a lot of people that are gunning for all electric or as much electric as possible, as soon as possible. Obviously, people that are worried about the carbon emissions from a global scale point of view. And from the EV market, I mean, this is going to be a massive negative. It's just, same as in the UK, there's that uncertainty, which is not really going to help, the EV market, whether you're in charging infrastructure, whether you're in specifically EV. Be interesting to see how it potentially affects EV sales. Bearing in mind, there's lots of incentives in the UK at the moment with regards to government grants and lots of grants out there for charging and these sort of things. Obviously, I've certainly seen, I think Alex has probably seen it as already. There's a lot of anti-EV people saying, oh yeah, let's go out and buy our petrols and diesels. Don't worry about EVs anymore. We don't have to worry about, people forcing EVs on us anymore. As ever, I'm just interested to see what's going to happen, what effects are going to be for me and everybody else. And that's what I'd like to explore in this session, really.
I think it's interesting as well that with all of these things, the debate's always got a little bit kind of confusing because, as much as they're not talking about necessarily allowing anything, but in particular they are talking about. We haven't seen the details. So apparently there's due to be an announcement this week, so we don't actually know where the grey area is going to be, or if there's going to be one at all. I know when I've read stuff previously, I mean, there was a big debate about, because there's been a consultation period where they're talking about reviewing the CO2 deadlines. That's been going on for some time. And one of the things they want to make sure of is that they don't penalise the companies that have invested really heavily in electrification. So the people, I mean, this is a multi-year process, isn't it? It involves changing staff, supply chains, your entire process and everything that you're doing. There's a lot of manufacturers who have put millions and millions and millions of pounds into this, and who now will suddenly find that actually you know, all of that investment may not have been as necessary as it looks like it might have been. And then there are certain manufacturers who have hesitated, Toyota being one of them, and that tends to be, I say hesitated, they are going all in on EV in Europe, but they've not been as quick to follow in and kind of go, yes, this is definitely going to happen. And I think there's always been a kind of a concern. I've always got the impression that there's a concern in Toyota that this could happen, is that if you put all your eggs in one basket, you then end up with no plan B, no fallback option. And I think in looking at it from this perspective, you kind of have to say, well, maybe they were right to do it. But what we don't know yet is the detail. We do know there's all sorts of rumors going around. My sense is that it would probably have some sort of limit in terms of hybrid as a kind of a cutoff. But one of the things that's significant, and it's worth kind of making this very clear, is 2035. It's not an arbitrary date. The point of 2035 is that it feeds into the wider net zero target that Europe is aiming for by 2050. The idea being that most vehicles last about 15 years. So by 2050, virtually all the vehicles on the road in the EU are zero carbon. Now, the way that's been, there's numerous ways that have been proposed to do that. You can theoretically do it with e-fuels, but there's no infrastructure in place to do it yet. So quite how you achieve that goal, if you're still selling, conventionally fueled vehicles after 2035 is anybody's guess, to be honest.
Yeah, and Commute Branch Line chipped in there earlier saying uncertainty with the flip-flopping. It's absolutely right. It's happened in the UK as well, and it's not just personal vehicles as well, because there's quite a lot of infrastructure going in for fleets as well. So it's I want to try and remain balanced on this. I've got skin in the game, being completely open and honest, because as Alex and some of the regular viewers know, that I'm in the EV infrastructure, EV transition scene as well. So I want to see it as being, I want to be as balanced as possible. But I suppose from my point of view, I'm not that keen on the stick mentality. So I think realistically, it's all about letting that technology shine. And there's so much negativity around EVs, generally speaking, from people that don't even drive them, which I think a lot of people that are watching this will probably know anyway. Dean's put in, I don't think it matters if the ban has been lifted or whatever is happening. There will be reduction in ICE sales. In turn, the cost of ICE will increase, making the switch to EVs make more sense. And it's a bit like the conversation we had last week and the week before on pay per mile. People are out there, cursing the fact that, I bought this EV and this pay per mile's come in, or you've got the anti-EV crowd going, you're gonna have to pay this pay per mile. But you look at the petrol prices, that the freeze is coming off in September. There are all these other things that are going to be coming in, which is going to encourage, again, it could be more stick from a cost point of view, because ultimately, that's the main reason I swapped to electric, was to save money. And I think when people sit down and do the maths and see how much they can save, even with the potential pay per mile coming in, which is also under consultation, not coming in until 2028, it still makes sense. And believe it or not, it does, they do drive better than ICE vehicles. And I'm I'm a petrol head, kind of. But the more I drive EVs, I just think, I'm not sure about this. But Alex, obviously, you've got your performance petrol car. What does it mean to you?
For me, I'll be happy to be as long as there's some infrastructure in place for me to refuel my old car and keep that going. I'm quite happy, but I can't imagine. So I was having this thought recently, because we've actually recently, we're on a temporary EV hiatus. The van went the other week. Long story, but I can't imagine myself buying a daily drive that wasn't at least a good plug-in hybrid, let alone if not fully electric. The only reason I go plug-in hybrid is there's lots of quite affordable, slightly more usable day-to-day plug-in hybrids from if you're looking towards the cheaper end of the market. But actually, these days there's so many good used EVs around that I just kind of couldn't really imagine myself. All I really need, I'm quite comfortable with anything that will do 250 miles to a charge. I could daily that all day long, and I'd drive it up and down and all over the country. I'm not fazed by it at all. I'm used to it. And for me, as you say, I just think they're a better day-to-day car than a nice vehicle.
John Baker Charge makes a really, really good point. EV does only make sense really if you've got a home charge or cheap charging at work or free charging. if you don't have a driveway, and we've talked about it before, two-tier charging, it does only make sense financially that way. So yeah, I should have put that caveat in there. Thanks for pulling me up on it, John.
Yeah, same.
So yeah, does it give the government, whether it's in the UK, well, not so much UK, because that's obviously, I say not happened yet. Could it happen? We'll talk about that in a second. But the EU, because their transition isn't actually going as well as the UK, although the UK want it to be better than it is. But does it give time for infrastructure to go in and have a slightly a more controlled, a more, I don't know, I think it's probably not a bad thing in that respect from an infrastructure point of view for those really difficult to charge cheaply circumstances, because there's no way that the infrastructure for cheap charging, overnight AC charging, like 7 kilowatt, is right in the UK yet. So on that point, do you think that will happen in the UK?
I think it's worth remembering that 2035 is still, it's what, 9 years away. There's an awful lot of change that's going to happen in that time. 9 years ago, get my dates right now. 9 years ago, dear me, dearie me. It's the end of 2016. If you think that cars like, the Hyundai Kona and things hadn't launched, that was a really big step change forward, wasn't it? And the only real long range vehicle you could buy at that point was Tesla Model S.
Yeah.
If you think about how much the market has changed in the 9 years, and okay, we're not on the same level of upward curve, but some of the other kind of infrastructure related issues are starting to get solved over time. We're getting standards put in place for things like contactless payment and uptime, and kind of having standards for roaming between networks and kind of accessing and depending on the charging infrastructure. And those are going to spur investments in making sure that the things that enable people to go electric in a way that's easier will all kind of follow, and all of that helps as well, and so that adds to that kind of, it makes it more viable for people regardless of the government policy on it. So
yeah, I think when I think about that many years ahead, being a bit of a Tesla bod, and now Kevin's bought and ordered a Tesla, if people didn't know, who's normally on the channel as well. Normally there's 3 of us, by the way. Is the fact that actually, what about full self-driving? You look in US, you look in China, you look at the progress that's being made there. In 9 years' time, forget about the ICE, the ICE new sale car ban. What about actually, it's going to be, driving as a service. It's going to be an Uber, press a button, that car's going to pull up and you're going to drive off. In my opinion, I think in 9 years' time, 10 years' time, I think we're going to be well on the way with that. Alex, you're smirking. What do you reckon?
I think I'll be older and a lot grayer before that becomes the norm. You'll get it in limited environments, but you're not going to be. I don't think in 10 years' time that you'll be able to buy a car that will do all of your driving for you. I think you'll have a car that will have conditional autonomy. I think we'll get a step higher, but I don't think that we'll get much higher than. We won't reach the full kind of robo-taxi stage, I don't think, by that point. Certainly not in terms of the same as it is now when you order a human-driven taxi.
I think it will be in pockets, like it is in certain places in the US at the moment. I don't know so much about the detail on China, but you think that in cities, if you've got no access to cheap charging, and it's actually works out cheaper to use that kind of service, maybe just go down to 1 car if you've got 2. I see that as being a massive, I think that would be a big change, and I think there's a lot of people in the industry that think that too. But saying that, you see all the stuff about AI recently, about the amount of power it's going to take, the amount of water. Will that actually happen? I saw a report recently saying that actually AI is it actually possible with what we've got in terms of power? It's going to take a hell of a lot. So it'll be interesting. Oh, it was the cost. The cost was like trillions. But then I was thinking, well, again, maybe this is maybe falls into Tesla's lap a little bit with what they're doing with robots and the potential. Was it 25 trillion that the potential market is for robots? Because the worker market, or the market for workers in the world, is like 50 trillion. So taking 50% of the workforce capital. There's so many changes going on at the moment. I think this is just very, very minor, but it's interesting because obviously it's just recently been announced. I'm just going to go into the comments here. So Roland's put, Lewis has put, I'd prefer to get a move on with keep the date. I worry it will allow EU manufacturers delay getting their act together and just fall further and further behind China.
Yeah.
A lot of it is because of lobbying from Stellantis, Mercedes, BMW, Volkswagen Group. Because I think if they didn't do it and got that lobbying, got that in place, I think they would absolutely be on the floor. I think a lot of them are struggling already. Roland's put, 2 streams really make it difficult to follow the comments and feedback. Can you fix it? We've had positive feedback to say that people want both, but thanks for your comment, mate. If more people say they prefer just the one, let us know in the comments. Dean's put, if the government can cut the red tape on the pavement turbocharged type installation, that should massively help the transition to EV, especially now he's able to do 400 miles as discussed last week. And I think, on that point, I think there needs to be a lot more sharing and using these apps like Connected Curb. I think Drip, Tap, that's another one where, again, you can sell kilowatt hours from your chargers. I think if we can get more of this, so your neighbor who or someone down the road who hasn't got access to cheap charging, you can make a little bit and they can get much cheaper charging. I think a lot more of that needs to be rolled out. That should be promoted a bit more. Jay, thanks for commenting. Europe is doing a self-goal. EU is a big disappointment. Europe is going to be the next third world country while the developing nations build. I think the whole of the EU is in a lot of trouble at the moment with all the stuff that's going on. Let's not open that can of worms. Dub City Big Ballers. That's a nice name. Thanks for commenting. Do you think a used 22 plate Tesla will drop even further the next 6 months? I mean, I've been monitoring Tesla Model 3 prices, and they really are like at the bottom of the market. They are just not moving. Yes, they'll take an initial drop. The 22 plates stay really, really strong because of the newer Ryzen chip rather than the Intel chip. But you still can't get Tesla Model 3 for less than 10 grand. There was one for 8 grand for literally a couple of days, and it was sold straight away. But they're holding really, really strong at the moment, which is good for me because I own 2 used ones.
Interestingly, it's come up a few times when I've kept an eye on kind of market reports from the big auction companies. Model 3, ID3, Kia e-Niro, Hyundai Kona tend to come up as names where, despite the overall market doom and gloom in terms of residual values and sale times, those vehicles tend to move on because they're quite palatable. If you're coming out of an ICE vehicle, they're very easy things to switch into. Long range, relatively quick charging times, familiar kind of, they're not too weird. They're kind of quite ordinary cars.
It's weird. What?
I mean, like they don't look weird. None of those cars look weird. They just, they're very kind of small C conservative vehicles, aren't they? They're not trying to do anything too far out of the ordinary. They're all kind of quite ordinary vehicles. They're, if you're looking to move into them, that's quite a kind of. It doesn't feel like a giant leap, does it? It just feels like a quiet version of what you may already have.
Oh, Lewis has got some gossip about the Leaf. They're really struggling to put any volumes through Sunderland. The Envision AESC battery plant is way behind and holding them up. We won't see lots of Leafs soon. That surprises me. I would have thought anything was holding them up. I would say it's just demand because other than the fact it's got the government grant, I don't see it as being particularly amazing in any area. It's a good looking car, but I think it's a bit too late for Nissan. I mean, arguably all the negative press and issues they've got financially, I think it's a bit too little too late. But let's get back onto the subject of the
you know what, ironically, one of the things that I don't think has helped all of this is the diesel scenario, where I think people, it's still quite fresh in mind. I mean, Dieselgate was only 10 years ago, and I think people are still kind of have this fresh in mind that they were sold the diesel thing. I mean, I still remember going to trade shows and things and seeing diesel, small diesel cars where they were sub 100 grams, so they'd have graphics down the side with like leaves and branches and clouds, and you must remember all this sort of stuff from like 10 years ago. And you just think, you look back now and just think that seems so wild, and the conversation's moved on so much. And actually, diesel had a place, perhaps in some small, very small niche applications, maybe still does, but it was a market that was massively overstimulated in terms of, tax incentives and so on and so on and so forth. And people thought they were doing the right thing. And I think people are just waiting for that to be the case with EVs as well, where someone goes, see, this is not the right thing to do. And actually, you need to buy something else instead. So people have kind of gone full circle and probably had a few diesel vehicles and then gone back into a petrol vehicle. And they're like, oh, we've gone full circle and we're back where we were. And all of a sudden, this is not the right thing to do. And, we're creating inner city smog and all the rest of it. And I think people feel that they've been duped a bit by it, and they probably look at the massive incentives for EVs and go, yeah, well, when are we going to be told that this is a problem? And things like the 3p per mile tax, they don't help with that. Plug-in hybrids a little bit as well. I mean, plug-in hybrids got massively pushed, still are being quite heavily pushed, but a lot of people learned the hard way that actually the CO2 figures on those are arbitrary, and if you deploy them wrong, you can get that really badly wrong. So I think people are just waiting to find out what's going to pull the rug on EVs, and stuff like this starts to make it look like, this is the start of the rot, and that you end up with a situation like you got with diesel, where people don't want those vehicles anymore.
Well, if we want to go conspiracy theorist, right, quite happy to go that way, because I suppose the only thing in my mind, and tell me if you think that there's another, and whack it in the comments, people, if you think there's another one, is the only thing that I can see that would go that way for EVs is the fact that, to reduce the number of cars on the roads. Because if you think about it, the number of dormant cars out there on the roads, driveways, parking, there's a lot out there. It's quite a lot of resource. And again, I'm going back to the full self-driving. If that does come in more volume, in 10 years' time in the major cities, not so much the rural areas, that actually it's going to be a government incentive to get rid of your vehicle. That's the way I see it. And again, from a conspiracy, now I'm at the conspiracy stage, I might as well put my tinfoil hat on as well, by saying that actually, they want to do that because they want to be able to control where you go. And if
I knew this was coming. I knew this was coming.
And then if people say, they'll control your electric car, which I know a lot of tinfoil hat people will say, they'll say, but if you haven't got your own vehicle and you have that Uber style or Tesla, Waymo, what have you style, what if you can't use the app because the government won't let you because you haven't got the special score and you've been saying something bad about the government? You could argue that that could come. I don't know if someone's mentioned that before, but it just interests me that it could potentially go that way. But I do genuinely believe that EVs, I think there will be a reduction. That they might say, no, you can't have more than X number of cars. It does feel like it's going into that kind of narrative at the moment. After EV, I think it might potentially go that way if we still stay on this particular course with, governments.
I think that the cracking point with that will be the point at which somebody starts to question the 0 grams per kilometer thing. Because the reality is that EVs are not 0 grams per kilometer, most of them. They're much lower than a petrol and diesel car. And actually, with a petrol and diesel car, you're only measuring tank to wheel anyway. You're not measuring the vast amount of CO2 emissions embedded in getting that fuel out of the ground, refined, and to a pump before it's burnt. You're just measuring tank to wheel. So there's an issue with both of them. But actually, there's an awful lot of decarbonisation talk going on. And unless you're running all of those vehicles off, now I sound like I'm being very, but the reality is that those vehicles are really, really low, and you can do kind of full well to wheel calculations in terms of CO2 on those vehicles. You can trace it all the way back to the source of generation, even if that's coming from a gas fired power station. You can measure hour by hour how much CO2 is involved in running it. But there will come a point where you can't class large amounts of 0 gram per kilometer vehicles based on their tailpipe emissions. That's going to have to come along at some point. And I think that's going to be something as well where people kind of go, hang on a minute, we were told, and it's like, yeah, but you've got to be sensible with it. On the one hand, yes, it's much lower, and there are faults with the way we do it with petrol and diesel cars, but petrol and diesel cars have never been sold as 0 emission because, well, they can't be, but there's a language issue, I think, involved with it, and that's going to be problematic at some point.
Well, this is the way it's going because you see, I think there was a couple of posts out there recently about seeing some meat or seeing some sort of produce where it had a carbon amount on it You know, and again, this is going into the realm of you could argue conspiracy, maybe a bit of tinfoil hat, the fact that actually you're going to have a CO2 allowance, you know, only allowed to eat a certain amount of meat a day and all the rest of it. But yeah, in the work that we do for fleets to understand their CO2 reduction, we look at well-to-wheel for ICE and also understanding the CO2 value for the production of the batteries and so on and so forth. I've always bought used EVs because I like my used vehicles, and obviously if people didn't know, I'm making an electric TVR with used batteries, a used motor, you know, repurpose, recycle. I really like that idea, but obviously the labor involved in that is pretty heavy. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years on that. Let me just dive into the comments because there's quite a few in here now. Eat Me has put, cars used to mean freedom, now they mean enslavement. I kind of do agree with you there. I remember my first drive in my VW Polo, you know, whacking Helter Skelter tape pack. I think it was DJ Hype, something like that. And yeah, freedom. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't really feel like that anymore. There's so much now in terms of costs. Bernard, thanks for chipping in. I think a reform government will be the end of EVs, as they will tax them off the road as they are funded by the gas industry. I don't think so. I mean, this is my opinion. It'd be interesting to hear Alex's. So I think from what Nigel Farage has said in recent speeches, that he's going to try and lower the cost of electric. Now, if he scraps all the net zero stuff, scraps all the incentives, that cost of electricity is key for improving and rolling out electric vehicles, not only on personal, but for fleet. That is the big negative at the moment for a lot of fleets, is the cost of electric. If you can get that cost down to less than 20 pence per kilowatt hour for putting into your electric HGVs, vans, it's a no-brainer. The total cost of ownership, the TCO, works so well. So yeah, I mean, proof's in the pudding. That's my opinion. Alex, what do you think?
Your average man on the street or woman on the street is not buying an EV to save the planet. It's a fact. They'll buy based on what fits their needs and what fits their budget. That's what they'll buy on. And if an EV does that better, they'll buy an EV. It's a simple. They just need to, in some case, but the negativity obviously doesn't help them to see that or to balance out. You know, it doesn't help balance the books when you're having things that are undermining confidence in the market, and then scrubbing the used market as well. It's worth remembering as well. The other thing, speaking of the kind of average man on the street, the average age of a car in the UK is what, 8 or 9 years old. Some places in Europe, the average age of the car the average age of cars on the road is in excess of 10 years. It's like 12, 13 years old. It's going to be quite a long time before you have to buy an EV. Even if even if the deadline doesn't move, you think of 2035 affecting the new car market in Europe, it's actually a relatively small part of the total fleet that's on sale in Europe. And so actually I think that there are going to be certain countries where it's going to happen anyway, because the kind of you'll get a replacement coming through where the majority of the fleet, even without a strict deadline in place, are going to go electric just because the vehicles are better and they do fit people's needs. But I think it's going to take a long time before everyone is, before you absolutely have to buy it and you've got no alternative. Of course, that depends on how much fueling infrastructure is left by that point, if there's no demand. But it's going to be well into the 2040s before it becomes very difficult to own a petrol, diesel or hybrid vehicle. We
could see the petrol station, diesel stations shutting down like the hydrogen ones have done more recently. So Community Branch Line, thanks for chipping in, mate. With Rollback Taxi rolling out, it's conceivable that Tesla may eventually stop selling cars to the public. That's very true, because what they were doing with their leases a while back, probably under a couple of years ago, is after the end of the lease, they were only selling them on leases where it goes back to Tesla, and you didn't have the option to buy. So I could absolutely believe that, because the more vehicles they've got, if full self-driving is working for them in certain areas, they want to be able to make the money doing that. So Dean, sooner they reintroduce the fuel duty escalator that they brought out in the early 2000s, the better. Yeah, potentially that might happen. And oil industry. Yeah, I mean, there's still oil in your EV, of course, and of the plastics that are made, not all of them are made with reusable parts. Although I've decided now, Alex, I'm not going to change the oil on my drive units on the Teslas, because I found a chap who had a 2018 Tesla Model 3 in America. He'd done over over 300,000 miles, same battery, same motors, never changed the oil once, and it's still going. He's passed it to his wife. He's bought a new one. So I've decided I'm not changing the oil. So there. Dean's put great point made there, Alex. There we go, Alex. Some praise there. None for me. Eat Me has said allowance from nanny state, pathetic way to operate. And Eat Me, the average man on the street is an idiot who just came out of the pub at lunch after 4 pints. I doubt it, because the average man on the street can't even afford to go to the
pub. Yeah. This is the other issue that comes out of this is actually people are not buying cars in general. I mean, everyone's been hobbled by massive rises in energy prices and mortgage costs and all that, and just the cost of just standing still. I mean, the days of cheap, we've had a decade or so of very, very cheap cars in the UK with very, very low interest rates, and the cost of cars has crept up, and the cost of houses has as well. It's kind of a similar thing, but we've had this kind of decade of artificially very cheap cars where people have just got used to going in every 3 years and getting another car, and it's just like another direct debit out of their account. Now we've got actual normal or semi-normal interest rates and very expensive cars. I mean, if you look at the average cost of cars in the UK, is massive. Average lease costs are well into the 50 plus thousand mark now for new cars. That's a huge amount of money. Yeah. Do you think what 50 to 60,000 pounds would have bought you even 10 years ago? I said bought you. If you think about a 50 to 60,000 pound car 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago, it's just when you look at this stuff every day, and I look at car prices all the time, and it's like that analogy of when you put a frog in a steadily boiling pot of water, it doesn't jump out, right, until it just boils to death in there. Whereas if you drop a frog into into an already boiling hot pot of water, it'll go ooh and jump straight out. Yeah. So I'm sat there watching the prices going up, and it's only when you step back and go, my God, cars are so expensive now. They're so expensive, and houses are too. I mean, because the rates have been low, the cost of the houses has gone up. Now the mortgage rate's gone back to where they should be. You're paying normal mortgage rates on an astronomically expensive house, and everyone's struggling with it, and nobody's buying cars because cars are one of the first purchases that gets hit as soon as people are a bit squeezed financially.
Yeah, I mean, part of that's obviously inflation, and there's a load of other factors. I won't get into the housing market because we don't really talk about houses, but it'd be interesting.
It's linked, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that tax in for houses over 500,000. I think there'll be lots of empty large houses. Let's not talk about that one, but that's another can of worms. But yeah, I mean, I was interested because I saw a bubble. I was watching Man versus Baby, which is the new Rowan Atkinson movie, and he had a little micro, the original bubble micro, and that's what I learned to drive in, back in '98 or whatever it was. And I was thinking, that'd be cool, just have a little run around like that. Couldn't find the bubble one. I found loads of the Renault ones, which look ugly as hell. You get them for like 200-300 quid, So I mean, I think there's still some really good deals on used, whether it's electric for sure. There's some really good deals if you compare it to like a petrol auto. Still some amazing deals out there, value for money. But I was talking to my friend who works for a BMW dealer, mini BMW, and he's saying the interest rates on used cars is like 13% APR. I mean, he said, the finance pen is like really, really low. I'm not surprised. No one's going to look at interest rate, especially where they come from. It's ridiculous. But no wonder people are looking at leases and looking at used car deals. It's just bananas. Lewis has just been, I was just driving around showing her kids other houses Christmas lights. I found out a very interesting fact. Every house with a driveway in Tynemouth has an Audi Q4 coupe. I never see coupe Q4s. That's interesting.
There's a handful around. It's interesting. One of the things talking about used, I don't know if you said there's a big association called the British Vehicle Rental and Leasing Association. They put out quarterly and annual reports. So they did a big survey of their members recently, and there's a huge focus on the used market and not trying to avoid basically having higher monthly rentals at the front end. The most recent stats on kind of used leasing is massive. I mean, I know this is a little off topic from 2035, but they're starting to find ways because obviously the whole company car market, for example, and salary sacrifice as an extension is all based on CO2. So if you were leasing a 3-year-old petrol or diesel car, you'd be paying higher BIC on it because you're dealing with
just for everyone.
benefit in kind. So that's your company car tax. Sorry, I should probably explain that as well. You end up with a non-competitive CO2 figure, possibly a slightly lower list price, but a non-competitive CO2 figure. Of course, with EVs, that disappears. You may be slightly down on range compared to the new ones, but you're still all at 0 grams per kilometre, and the value of the vehicle that you use to make those tax calculations is set for life. So it's not based on what you buy the vehicle for or what the leasing company buys it for, but the list price when new. So it's fixed for life. So what you're actually benefiting from if you lease a second life EV, so an EV that's come off a company car fleet at 3 years, is you're getting something with a flat 0 grams per kilometre, setting your company car tax rate. It's all a percentage of all based on a percentage of this list price when new, but the list price is based on what it was 3 years ago for that car. So if you're leasing, say, a Q4, I'm just going to pick on that because it was in the comments just then, you can lease yourself now a Q4 and it will fall into the same tax band as a new one, but it will be based on a lower list price from 3 years ago because you won't have the 3 years of inflation in the meantime on the list prices. So you can see why that's actually quite an attractive way of getting vehicles in, and the growth is enormous. So there's, I mean, it's quite small. It's only about 40,000 vehicles in the UK, which is out of a fleet of, it's around 1 million or so. I should know this off by heart as well. I think it's coming up to 2 million. But anyway, it's a big fleet of vehicles. It's not a massive thing, but it's growing really quickly because I think they're starting to find that there are opportunities to offer some quite attractive lease deals to second owners, and you can see why. You can see why that would be the case.
But like even electric cars 3 years ago, there's some cracking vehicles out there. And anyone that didn't cover it, see it last week, we covered EVs over 400 miles, me and Kevin last week. So go and check that out. But yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it, in terms of where the best value lies, and that's what I always try and seek is like where is the best value, whether it comes from electric, and used to when we used to have petrol cars as well. And I thought the best value would be me buying from auction, and had all the trials and tribulations of buying that 219,000 mile Tesla Model 3, which, funnily enough, has just driven to Bath and back. Absolutely no issues. So yeah, I think the longevity of these EVs is just proven now. And I think anyone that says anything negative about, there's always going to be crap EVs out there, just like there's crap ICE cars. But as a rule of thumb, the EVs are really good vehicles. And I think it's a shame that there's all this flopping about in terms of fixing a particular ban. Like I said before, I don't particularly agree with the stick method. I think that the technology should shine, and I think now we've got the infrastructure in the main, other than the people that don't have the home charging, which still need sorting out. I think it should just keep coming, just keep trickling along. Do you think it'll have a negative effect in EU? That do you think fleets and personal vehicles, or do you think it will just but might be a little stall and it will just carry on as normal?
Well, the tax rules are largely based on CO2 all across Europe anyway. I mean, the big challenge, I guess, in fleet is vans. And that's where I guess the stick approach is not so good, because if you end up saying that you can't buy a new EV, as long as van fleets can still run diesel vehicles, if there's no electric van that fits their needs, they'll just run older diesel vehicles, which is kind of an own goal if you think about it. You do have that less efficient, not up with the latest standards in terms of emissions and so on. And I think there is a risk of doing that if you're not slightly pragmatic. So I can see the argument from that state in that, but I think again in the UK, if you look at where all the growth is, fleets again, generally speaking, are kind of looking at it and going, with cars, they're getting massive tax incentives to go for them, and so they're just going for them because it's a no-brainer. It's funny. I would imagine that if you suddenly say to a company car driver who may be a bit hesitant about going electric, it's like, well, you can either have this petrol or diesel car, or you can have 90% cheaper tax per month, but you've got to have an EV. They go, actually, yeah, sod it. I'll take the hit and I'll go for an EV.
But then again, it all depends on charging and cheap. Being able to charge it cheap. It always comes back to that. So it'd be interesting to see if Europe or the UK, if there's some sort of new technology, or, I know that we've mentioned turbocharge, which I think is another extra, maybe 10% of the market based on the figures that I've seen. But there still needs to be something that helps that. But yeah,
bringing down public charging costs will help with that as well.
Yeah,
the public charging costs are a massive part of that cost base we've talked
but
about.
I don't think it's not. I mean, we've spoken about it before, but I don't think public charging costs are going to change unless the only
No, I
change
don't either.
that could potentially help it is if they change the VAT amount. But I don't think that's going to happen either, because the government need as much money as they can get at the moment already. And let's not go into what they're using it on. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the actual what's happening with fleets, there has been a stall with vans, and I think that is because a large majority of vans go home. And who's going to actually have their van on their driveway if they've got a driveway and have a charger? Will the company want to give them a charger? Yeah, some do, some don't. But this is really interesting because next week we've got Jamie Sands, who works for Welsh's Group, and he's going to be talking us through what's happening with electric HGV. I've got some experience in that as well. And there's actually, believe it or not, some serious progress going on with electric HGV, which is great to hear, because, you know, being behind the smelly, dirty truck, no one likes that, let's be honest. But if they can make the TCO work, which it does look like they can if they can get the price of electric cheap. But yeah, tune in next week for that, because that's going to be really, really insightful, I think, for a lot of people, because you don't really see them on the road at the moment. However, the OEMs that I've been speaking to, they've got demos booked out all of next year, which is great. Still twice the price of diesel trucks, but then the hydrogen ones are twice the price of electric ones. And then where do you get the hydrogen from? So, but we've spoken about hydrogen before, haven't we, Alex? I think we share different views on hydrogen. Me and Alex, but yeah, commuter branch lines just put in Tesla still offering 0% and 3K deposit on the Model 3. I've got a referral code in Chargeheads UK if you check out the latest videos, not the lives, if people want to save money, which Kev did actually. And yeah, so he's ordered his long range Tesla Model 3. And just to clarify, and I think this is interesting to point out, how many electric cars do you think Kevin's driven now? It's got to be 50, isn't it?
It's got a lot, yeah.
Yeah, a lot. And he didn't really like Teslas, did he?
Yeah, no, I wasn't overly swayed on it.
And then he drove one, and now he's just bought one. So, Alex, when are you driving one?
Oh, I've driven them, and
that won't be a very balanced podcast if we've all got Teslas, will it, Alex?
No, but yeah, I mean, I can see why. I mean, it is. I always feel this comes across as being derogatory. The Model 3 is
a
Mondeo of the 2020s, and there's nothing wrong with that. Mondeo fitted a lot of needs for a lot of people. It was efficient, it was reliable, it did the long distance thing really well for an awful lot of people. There's nothing wrong with it being like a Mondeo, but it is, yeah.
It's a very fast Mondeo with lots of tech. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Do you know what you say about that? Do you know what I saw the other day? I saw Mondeo ST.
ST220?
Yes, ST220, yeah.
There we go.
Making a lot of noise. Big oval tailpipes on the back, yeah. I haven't seen one of those for years.
No, they didn't sell many, I don't think.
No, I don't think so, no.
Dean's just put in the chat, what about mandating that if a workplace has 50 plus employees with 50 plus parking spaces in the car park, then you must provide 25% of these spaces with EV charging facilities? Who's going to pay for it, though? Because that is a shed load of money. I mean, that, an AC charger, even if you're buying in bulk, you're talking 500-600 quid, plus all the cabling, plus extra power, plus the groundworks. I mean, you're talking, that's a lot of money. You're talking like 50 grand minimum. Who's paying for that? And
there's already rules in place as well in terms of we are moving in that direction. There are rules in place for redevelopment and new development in terms of how many you have to have preparation for a certain number of charging points, which being exhausted, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a few. So you've got to have a certain number of bays that are designated, and then a certain provision for a certain other number of bays in future. So you have to put some of the groundwork in if you're redeveloping or building from scratch. But yeah, there's nothing like that in place. And you're right, it is a big investment. I
mean, there are actually incentives and grants for EV charging, but I think they've just finished. There's actually, if anyone's in Scotland and have got a fleet over 7.5 ton. Under 100 vehicles based in Scotland, there is a grant for free analysis, and which I do with Dynamon. So if you want to take advantage of up to £20,000 worth of grant funding for that, then get in touch with myself, because it's just a no-brainer. Even if you're not thinking about going electric, when it does come in, you've got that analysis to work off in 5 years' time or what have you. Even if diesel's running through your veins, you can give a toss about electric. What we got in here? So we've got Dub City Big Ballers. Love that. That's a great name. Looking for a 2022 play Model 3 performance to buy in June 2026. Would you recommend PCP to protect against depreciation or just buy it cash? Now, I've got a 22 plate Model 3 performance with a lot of miles on it. I personally would make sure you go for one that has the LG battery, not the Panasonic, because it has better longevity. So, which I think is just after 22 plate, which you can check by looking at the VIN. And I would go for a high mileage one. I'd go for like a 80,000 mile plus and just buy it on, buy it with cash or buy it with, bank loan, because once it's taken that depreciation of like over a certain mileage, I don't think you'll have an issue. PCP is great to protect against depreciation, but once it's taken that initial hit, the way that the trajectory of EVs going, I think you'll be absolutely fine. So yeah, that's my opinion on it. So Alex, did you have an opinion on it at all in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've hit peak kind of. I mean, the market's taken a hammering from numerous different things. Some of the pressures we mentioned earlier about cost of living, but also in terms of early days of manufacturers then having to discount things quite heavily, which has sort of scrubbed away at those used values. So I think generally speaking, the market has taken as much of a hit as it's going to take. I think there's probably a little bit more to give, but not much. I think if anything, you're going to start to see things start to stabilize.
I saw a really good deal actually. I think it was about 17 grand. It was a 72 plate Tesla Model 3 performance, and done. It was like 16 grand, 120,000 miles, 72 plate, and I bought mine. I think it owes me about 12 minus any money that I got from the YouTube channel from the videos that I've done, because I think the video that I first had done, it's done like 108,000 views now. So yeah, I mean it's still the cheapest one out there, but obviously it's got a hell of a lot of miles and quite a chunk of depreciation, but degradation. But I think it's had the battery degradation because I don't think they looked after the battery, and it's the Panasonic battery, which isn't as good as the LG one. But if ours has done 229,000 miles now, then I think you'll be fine buying one with 100,000 miles personally. Kevin has seen the light and bought a Model 3. Yes. One with the new indicator stalk and the extra range, which is obviously the one to go for. The problem with Tesla is they still have nothing to offer if you want a small EV. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Seeing Renault 5 EVs, and I need to drive one because they look amazing.
Yeah, I need to drive one as well.
They look so good as well. I need to. Even my next door neighbour, who normally has supercars outside his house, had one outside his house, which is strange. I have to ask him about that. So our work has 40 to 50, whatever the limits of the old grant was. Whatever the limit for the old grant was. Yeah, I think it was quite a strong grant actually. I think it was like 75% or something like that. I forget because I wasn't in infrastructure when that grant came out. It's good to hear. Be interested to know what they
40
use.
40 is the limit. If it's the workplace charging scheme, it's 40.
Oh, sorry, I misread that. Did you say they've already got them in there? It'd be interesting to know a bit more detail about whether they charge you or whether it's free, what have you. The French have a law that if you want to build a car park, you must build a solar canopy and provide EV chargers. That just makes sense, though, doesn't it? It's just dead space otherwise. Eat me's back. Too much government interference is the big problem, as well as giving rich people grant to buy cars. Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about it before. I think that money could go towards, like cheaper rates on loans for used EVs. I mean, there's so many good used EVs out there. I've taken advantage of a grant when it first came out, and being completely open and honest, the market was good. It was the EV bubble. As soon as I got the car, I'd already bought the Tesla because there was a delay on my Skoda Enyaq. I sold it straight away for a profit. So you're absolutely right. I think it's the wrong thing.
The interesting thing as well is obviously salary sacrifice gets touted as this kind of way that it's a lot of people are getting into EVs through that, and it's kind of it's very much weighted towards 40% taxpayers and higher, and you can see that in terms of the figures, in terms of who's getting them. now that we're starting to get this influx of vehicles, like as low as small as things like the Dacia Spring, but then size like we've got EC3 and EC3 Aircross and Renault 5 and Renault 4. Now you're starting to get those vehicles in the sub £30,000 mark with the lower monthly rentals and so on. The limits with salary sacrifice is you can't. So the way that it works is you give away some of your gross salary for the vehicle, and you get low tax rates then on that on the vehicle instead of on the amount of income that you give up. But you are limited by your salary. So if you're a relatively low income earner, your amount that you contribute towards the car can't take you under the minimum wage. So the more cheap EVs you get, the more opportunities you have for kind of lower income earners to take advantage of those schemes. So even your lower income earner probably can't get into a Model Y because that would take them under the minimum wage, and therefore they wouldn't be eligible for the scheme. So as much as you can offer it to all your employees, the more cheap EVs that you have around to choose from, the more people can take advantage of those schemes. And I think also you'll find that cars like the Renault 5 will be very palatable second-hand cars because they're a small vehicle. They're not, they're kind of a well-known, they're a known brand, they're a known quantity. And I think that's where you'll start to see some of the average market values evening out.
I'd be just based on Eat Me comment. I was interested. I was just thinking just then. I mean, it'd be interesting to know, like the Ford Puma E, what the actual monthly payment is on that, and what level of deposit you need to put in. Because I do agree that government grants that can only benefit people that are more wealthy is the wrong thing. But then again, if it's a very low deposit to put in and the monthly payments that not that high, then everybody can take advantage of that. Unless they haven't got the spare cash per month. But generally speaking, that's how everybody buys their cars, whether they're wealthy or not. No one's got, generally speaking, £5,000 lying around, not even £3,000 these days, I would argue, with what's going on in the market. Charlie, you're absolutely right. 80,000 isn't high mileage for an EV. But for people that haven't bought an EV before, they might not know that. But again, it depends on the EV. But yeah, for people who don't know, run 2 Tesla Model 3s, one a 69 plate, that's done 137,000 miles, and the 22 plate I've got, the Model 3 Performance, that's done 229,000 miles. Still going, still fine, and yeah, I use them every day. 25p per kilowatt hour, which I think is perfect, cheap for people to have the convenience to go EV, not free, so that people with home charging hog it because it's free. Yeah, I mean, 25p is about right, isn't it? I mean, it's still, if you can get kilowatt hour price down to 25 pence, that's still cheaper than having a nice car. So if
it's about half the price. That's roughly what we're paying at home at the moment. We're on a flat rate tariff. That's what we're paying to charge, and we're half the price of our old car.
But that sounds expensive to me because I pay 6.7 pence because I've got the.
No, I know, but my point being, you don't have to try very hard. You don't even have to charge off peak to get. The more that you do to kind of get it right, the more savings you get. But even in a lazy household like this one, where we're still on a flat rate tariff at off-gem rates and so on, something that I'm working towards changing in my new place, you can still make significant savings. We've halved our fuel costs even on a flat rate tariff.
But you can charge at some. I can't remember what I charged, how much it was at the Tesla Telford charger. I'm sure it was in the 20s. And then in France, I mean, if anyone watches the video, I went to France and back, it's like 18 pence per kilowatt hour at a Tesla charger there. So, but yeah, I mean, it all depends, I think, on your living situation, where you live close to potentially a Tesla charger. If you haven't got a Tesla, it's like 10 pence per kilowatt hour more, isn't it? Or you pay that £10 a month for the premium, and then you can take advantage of that way. It's just understanding it and understanding where you can see value. And it might be the case that you can't see the value and the EV isn't right for you, and that's fine. But if there are sticks which are going to harm hurt you in your wallet for that, then that's not right, is it? It's not fair. And I'm a big believer of things need to be fair when government bring things in, because ultimately we're the ones that bring them in for it to be fair for everyone as much as they can. Not always the case at the moment. 18 pence per kilowatt hour my workplace is charging. That's really good, isn't it?
That is really good. Yeah, my
company isn't making any money on it. I mean, that's really good, really good. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if anyone else has got any experience of what their company is charging them. Really interested to see that. By the way, while we've got a few people in, we have got, at the end of the year, we have a big fat EV quiz. Although we are balanced, We might even chuck an ice question in there as well. But we normally have a big, fat, juicy quiz on EVs. So anyone that is into it will have that. And that will be the last Sunday of the year. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what the questions are going to be on that. But like I said, next week, we've also got electric HGV talk next week. I think that's going to wow a lot of people. But yeah, on the 28th of December, if you're around, we'll have that live. And don't forget, if you didn't watch all of this live, then we are on Spotify as well. We're on X Live at the same time, but I always put it on Spotify after the event. So please share, please like, please subscribe. I've been a bit slow on the videos on Chargeheads recently because I've just had a lot of family and Christmas stuff going on. So apologies for that. Anyone that normally watches every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. But we've got lots of exciting things going on with the electric TVR at the moment, which is going to be coming up, and stuff on the modified Tesla, etc. I think we're drawing to an end. So what we normally do at this time is just say what we're doing this week and what we've been doing. It's just me and Alex this time. Alex normally says he's been a bit of a secret squirrel, but what are you up to at the moment, Alex?
What have I got this week? I am driving a new EV on Wednesday, which on account of not being remembering off the top of my head whether it's embargoed or not, I'll be cautious and not say it, but I'll fill you in next time. Driving new EV on Wednesday, and PBWing at some point this week as well. But the rest of the week, unfortunately, secret squirrel stuff, I'm afraid.
It's always secret squirrel with Alex. He's deep
always
in the
is.
industry. He's a man in the know. And I think Alex has probably driven more electric cars than I've had hot dinners. So he's a good man to have to give us, feedback on what's happening. Although I still think he needs to drive Tesla of some kind.
I do need to drive the new one. I drove one of the first Model S's in the UK.
There we go. What was that?
Actually, I drove. Better than that. I drove my first Model S in Europe in 2012. So I was way ahead of the curve with all of that. It was a US spec one on German number plates. I think they had about like 2 or 3 of them. I drove a black one, and it had loads of additional bits that they kind of added to kind of Europeanize it, literally just additional switchgear and stuff. But yeah, 2012, first one I drove.
What did you think when you first in 2012? Bear in mind what was out then, like a Mitsubishi Eon, and Nissan Leaf, as Renault Zoe. What did you think when you first?
We latched on to. I can't remember where I bumped into the at the time PR guy, but I was there was a point where we were like really ahead talking about kind of just how important Tesla was going to be, and I've got all of this stuff is on record. You can look it up. And when they launched it launched them in the UK, I'll come back. Yeah, sorry, I'll get to that later. But 2012, I remember going out in this car, and the guy we went through this little German village that was on the outskirts of Munich Airport, because that's where we were staying. They sort of shipped us in. They did all the fleet mags, got them all in, and said, "Look, we're really keen on fleet. This is a really important car for fleet." And they sat down with a guy called George Blankenship, and interviewed him. He was the head of kind of customer experience at the time, and he was showing me all the stuff on his app and all the rest of it. And he's like, "I can't wait for you to drive the car." And I took this car out, and I just remember that they set up a route where it's like a little bit of stuff around town where you could go through all the different drive modes, and then a section where you could just floor it. And I remember flooring it and being like, yeah, this is gonna change the game completely. And I was right, and it did. The interesting thing is that 18
you put all your money into the shares at that point, and you've made millions, right?
Do you know what? The only reason that I didn't is, as I was coming around to the thought that I probably ought to, what was the company called? Fisker went bust, and Fisker were trickling along in the background at that point and looking like they were going to be neck and neck with Tesla. And I had a bit of a wobble when Fisker went bust, and it was a missed opportunity. But there was a huddle when the Model, I'm name dropping now, when the Model S came to the UK for the first time in 2014, they did a launch event in London, and I was part of the media huddle interviewing Elon Musk. So I've been literally like 3-4 feet away from Elon Musk at one point back in the day. I've got a photo of him. There's a picture of him plugging a car in London, a red Model S. And I've actually got a mobile phone version of that picture and the recording of the session. And then when they brought all the photographers in and all the journalists kind of got pushed back, you can see me in the background with holding my phone up, taking a picture of the photographers, taking a picture of Elon Musk.
your iPhone 4S or something like that.
It would have been an iPhone 4S, yes. It would have been an
iPhone one in
iPhone
the drawer,
4S.
mate. You know, you can't beat that kind of Nokia 3210 technology. The TVR will not be badged as the EVR, but I was really upset because I was listening to Johnny Smith on the Smith and Sniff podcast, and they're talking about TVR bringing out an electric vehicle, and they said that was a stupid idea. And then he said he would like to do it in his Jeremy Clarkson voice, stupid. And I was quite hurt. There we go. The Renault Fluence, I didn't buy the Renault Fluence because I didn't realize it had an inverter issue. And to buy an inverter, basically, for people who weren't watching it last week, there's a Renault Fluence in Luton for £1,000. The inverter's broken. I thought that'd be a great video. I drive to Luton to find the cheapest electric car. I mean, that's great in itself. But I haven't found anyone to fix the inverter, but it's still on the potential cards. Although I've probably said that a bit loud, so my missus is probably going to be a battering later.
It is the second worst EV I've ever driven.
Wouldn't it be so cool just to modify the hell out of it and turn it into like a max power, take the piss, like a
I've seen one. Because, you know, it's basically a Megane saloon. I've seen one with the Renault Sport front end on it.
Sorry. Shame about the shares, Alex. If wishes were fishes, we'd all cast nets in the sea. Yeah, I definitely went in at the wrong time, but there we go. Yeah, in terms of what I'm doing, yeah, just prepping for last week of work, finishing hard, and yeah, Christmas dues and that sort of thing, and preparing for the EV quiz at the end of the year with Alex and the Kev. So looking forward to that. But yeah, everyone, for next week, electric HGVs. Thanks everyone for commenting. Really good podcast, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it out there for everyone else, for all the balanced EV podcast for everyone to listen to. Thanks for chipping in, everyone, and we'll see you